Alright, welcome to another video, and before we get started, I'd like to take a quick minute to thank all the Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members whose names you see scrolling across the screen right now. They make this financially possible, and without you, I probably wouldn't be here making videos, so thank you. Alright, so today we have a little bit different kind of video. Recently we've been flying the little eSky Eagle with Walksnail System in it. But in the past, it's come up a few times talking about efficiency. As I've been playing around with the motor and prop setup and everything on here, I've kind of talked about efficiency before with this little airplane. And I've had a few people ask me how long it would fly. And normally I fly it on one of these 4S 1P. This one's the Zod. I have another one, a little Titan, but it's a 4S 1P 18650. These are good for about 3,000 milliamp hours. They're rated for 35. I like to push them to about 3,000. And I kind of said it should fly for around 45 minutes or so if everything worked out the way it seemed like it should. But I never really pushed it for that. But what I decided to do was load this one up. This is a Cluosi 3S 4P. It's basic 4S 2P basically. I'm sorry about that. It's basically two of these batteries stacked end to end, running 4S in parallel. Now it is rated for 7,000 milliamp hours, 7 amp hours according to the label. Which these are the same cells. These are all Sony, or not Sony, they're Panasonic NCR 18650GA cells, which are 3,500 milliamp hours each. So two of them together should be 7,000 theoretically. But these batteries were sold on AliExpress, if I remember right. But they were dirt cheap. Cheaper than you get the individual cells and build your own battery for. Which kind of raised some questions, but nonetheless, we decided to get a couple of them and try them out recently. Well, some time ago, last year or two. But they work well, but they don't perform as well as they should as far as capacity. From my testing, from what I remember, I was able to get almost 6,000 milliamp hours out of this one before the voltage was pretty much down. So don't go by what's marked on it. But this same battery with good quality cells in it should give you about 7,000 milliamp hours. But this particular one is only going to do about 6 on a good day. Slightly less than 6. But nonetheless, I decided to load it up in there. There's room for it since I have my servos pushed back. I'm trying to do this one-handed. We can look in there. I have my servos pushed way in the back. And you can kind of see this is the holes where the servos used to sit. Now they're kind of way back there. So that gives me enough room to slide this long battery back so that the extra weight is kind of under the center of gravity. So the center of gravity doesn't move much with either one of these. I can run the one cell right up here under the battery strap and keep the balance fine, or I can run the two double one kind of push farther back and keep the center of gravity right. And speaking of weight, going from one battery to the two adds about 172 grams if I remember right. And this little plane does have a relatively large kind of high lift wing design. So it should handle the weight just fine. It's pretty much a floater with one battery anyway. It's pretty light. But the extra 172 grams of weight didn't change the flight characteristics very much. The center of gravity was about between an eighth and a quarter inch farther forward. So it couldn't go back anymore with this battery because it would kind of hit the push rods as the arms kind of deflected. The push rod would come up and touch the battery if it went back any further. So other than that, there was no other changes. I didn't retune anything as far as throttle, cruise throttle, and stuff like that to compensate for the extra weight. But I decided to go ahead and load that battery up and set a mission with a few waypoints. And just let it go and fly that same mission over and over and see how long it would stay in the air. So let's get on with that and see how it did. Alright, so you can see we're taking off now. Instead of using takeoff mode, I've just kind of enabled the auto mode, which is going to fly my mission. I put a takeoff command at the start of the mission, which is basically going to take off and fly straight out here till it's happy that it gets to a certain altitude, and then it'll start running through the waypoints. So you'll see here in just a minute it'll complete the takeoff. There we go, takeoff level off starting. And now we're going to turn to waypoint number 2 in the mission. And now we've reached that waypoint, so we're going to waypoint 3 now. Um, so you might notice we do have quite a bit of a crosswind. It's about a 10, 11 mile an hour crosswind from the north blowing south. Um, that in my mind that kind of affects the efficiency a little bit because kind of over time we're basically running this mission. You'll see. I've just pulled the GPS up right there so you can see it. You can see the purple line is the actual track of the airplane, and the yellow line is the projected path to follow the mission. And you can see we're doing a pretty good job of running right along that projected path there. Staying dead on course, everything looks good. But like I was saying, we're running that waypoint mission. It's kind of running east and west. So over time, as we fly that mission, we're flying through a crosswind, so it kind of stretches it out a little bit over time. I don't know how much that really affects efficiency overall, as far as power needed for distance covered and everything. And there was a couple of nice birds out on the way there. I noticed them. Um, you can see there's some hawks out here, kind of catching thermal lift because, like I said, I did start this flight earlier in the day, not midday or anything like that, but I made it a point to start flying a little bit earlier than I usually do, just so that I could have enough time to run the battery down before it was too dark, before I had to land for that reason. But so the birds were still out riding thermals and everything, and when I saw those there, that's one of my favorite things to do is try to find lift and fly with those birds like that when they're out riding thermals. But we decided to go ahead and stay on mission and let it do its thing and finish this out like we planned. But yeah, so what I was saying with the crosswind and a little bit of maneuvering rather than just flying one long waypoint and back, just flying one straight line over time. Just some maneuvering around the mission, around the waypoints and everything. With a bit of crosswind, it kind of gives me a little bit more realistic number, because that all does use a little bit more power in the turns and to compensate with the crosswind and stuff like that, which adds up over time. But I was just kind of going for a realistic number rather than absolute maximum duration. So we decided to go ahead and do it like this. And this also keeps the airplane relatively close to home. My furthest point out was like 2 miles. But you'll see here, well, basically we're going to finish out one cycle of the mission, and then I'll skip ahead because I can tell you now that this flight was absolutely long enough that I doubt there's anyone watching my videos that would watch through the entire flight if I put it up uncut. Anyway, I was actually quite bored by the time I was in the flying, running battery down. Now the ending wasn't very boring. It was pretty exciting, actually. You probably want to stick around for that part. But you can see here we're coming up on the end of that mission. These 2 waypoints. I just had one there. That same little point 2 miles from home that I usually fly to. It's been kind of my little point of interest as I've been playing around with the walk snail stuff and all that lately. But then I put another one a little bit north, so we fly this one little leg a little ways north, and then we'll turn and kind of follow back home. But yeah, we'll run through one cycle of the mission and explain a couple of things on that, and then we'll just kind of throw up some highlights until we get to the end of the flight. So I'm going to be cutting most of this out and just kind of leave you with the end result here shortly. But yeah, as far as going over the airplane setup, we're still running that Zing motor, which I don't remember the specs right offhand. I'll put those up as far as the motor size and kV rating. I'll put those on screen here, as well as the prop we're running. I know it's a Gemfan prop, but I don't remember the exact model number of it. It's a pretty efficient little prop. Out of all the ones I tried, it seemed to do best. And of course, we're running that 4S 2P Cluo pack right now, which is rated for 7,000, but realistically, I don't think it'll do. Well, actually, I already know the end result here, but based on my testing before, it seemed like it was going to do close to 6,000, but in practice in the air, we did even a little bit less than that. But still pretty acceptable for the price. But if I were to replace that battery with a good quality battery pack made out of quality cells that actually performed the way they should and what they're rated for, it would do even better than it did on this particular flight. But like I said, I was bored by the time I flew it, and I doubt I'll ever need to push this little airplane for its maximum efficiency anymore, unless it's just kind of a personal challenge, kind of like this flight was, just to see what it can do. But I'm already more than satisfied with it. You can see the wings actually getting kind of rocked around a little bit right now. We have that dead on crosswind hitting us, still 10 to 11 miles an hour. And it is a little bit turbulent coming off all the trees and the flood levee and stuff right there, kind of to the north of us. And if I remember right, I had these waypoints set up for either 200 or 250 feet altitude. I'm almost positive they're 250 feet, but we won't be able to see that until we move the GPS overlay there. But the point is, we probably could have either got down a little bit lower and got under that turbulent air, or climbed above it maybe. But I kind of like this 250 foot round number, and that's what the waypoints were set for, so that's where we flew it. Or it flew itself, to be more accurate. But yeah, this is talking about some more specs on the airplane. This is the the F765WSE Matek flight controller with Arduplane. This is a 4.4 dev build with the horizon aspect ratio fix, which I'm not positive if that's made it into the nightly builds or not yet. It's been merged, so it's probably in the nightly builds, but I don't know if it was backported into stable release yet. Or if it ever will be anyway. But that's what I'm flying on it right now. It's basically a nightly build of 4.4 from a week or two ago. I don't exactly remember when. Probably a couple of weeks now. And the Walk-Snell system is the full-size transmitter with the nano camera, running full power and 1080p, 60 FPS, and 25 megabits per second bitrate. And now you see we're kind of coming up on the end of this first leg of the mission here. Now you can see down there I had a jump command to go from this last waypoint and start back to waypoint 2, but for some reason it didn't work, and I probably need to look back into that and see. You can see it actually completed the mission here and switched to return to launch. So I let it go ahead and loiter my little rally point, which puts it right out over the flying field, kind of south of the runway there. And I let it finish this this lap around, and you can see I switched back to auto right there to go back to waypoint 2. And I think I know why that jump command didn't work, because I think you have to specify a number of times that you want it to repeat the cycle. And I set mine to 0, I think, thinking that it would just do it indefinitely. Or actually I didn't set a number. I just left it. I was thinking if I didn't set a number, it would go indefinitely, but I think one or two things either is the culprit here. Either you need to set it to 0 to trigger it to do it indefinitely, or there's no option to do it indefinitely. I didn't read the documentation. I just kind of threw this up last minute going off memory, and I probably got that wrong. But everything worked except my jump command. It just finished the mission as it normally does and ignored that jump command. It's probably because I entered it wrong, but I will look back at that later. So basically what I did is every time it reached that last waypoint and triggered return to launch, I just immediately switched it back to auto, so it jumped right back to waypoint 2, which was the first one after my takeoff command. And so we're basically just going to keep flying this circle out here over and over and over until the battery runs dead. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of throw up a couple of little interesting points that happened along the way, and then we'll jump right to the end. This is coming up on the end of the next lap around that waypoint mission. I just thought I'd throw it in just to kind of demonstrate what I was talking about, how I let it reach the last waypoint, and you'll see it trigger return to launch, and as soon as it does, I go back into auto, just so that we kind of continue that mission. Just kind of manually a jump. It's me manually doing a jump command, basically. You see it starts return to launch, and then I trigger auto. And in doing so, it does lose a little bit of altitude when it intends to drop down to the set altitude to loiter around that waypoint, that rally point. So it'll kind of push the nose down, and I'll switch to auto and it climbs back up. So that's another place we could have gained a little bit more efficiency and maybe flown a little bit longer. But like I said, this is a more realistic test, I think, given the crosswind and flying the waypoints and doing turns and all that stuff. It's a little bit more realistic number in my opinion. So now here we are further into the flight. We've been flying for 42 minutes now. And like I said, I was going to put up some more interesting things that I noticed along the way. And I noticed that on this pass, all the cows you can see straight ahead, just below the AHI there in the pasture, they had been all hanging out in that kind of northwest corner of the pasture there. But for some reason on this pass, they had all formed this almost perfectly straight diagonal line across the pasture there. I was just kind of wondering what that was about. And obviously, growing up out here, there's cows on the levees and pastures and everything. I've been seeing these cows out here all my life, and I've noticed before that if one cow breaks away from the herd and starts walking across the pasture or down the levee or whatever, the rest of them will kind of fall in line and follow him. It's like they kind of follow suit, I guess. I don't know. It's interesting, kind of the way they think and behave. But I guess that's what happened here. One cow decided he wanted to walk to the opposite corner of the pasture, and all the rest of them followed. But yeah, like I said, this flight was pretty boring. I'm over here kind of contemplating the behavior of cows. But yeah, that's pretty much how boring this flight was. Just running the mission over and over and over. And that's kind of all there was to look at, and really the only thing I noticed during the flight. There's an airplane up there I was looking at, kind of flying a little bit more altitude than we are. But yeah, we'll get on to it and continue on. Alright, so we've skipped ahead. This is on the last lap around the mission. You see we've been flying for 79 minutes right now. And obviously my battery voltage is all the way down to 12.5 volts. I had actually almost decided to stay close to home to finish running the battery out before I started this final leg of the mission. This was actually the 10th lap around that mission, that cycle of waypoints. But I decided to go ahead and let it finish. And that was probably not the best decision, as you'll see here, or coming up shortly. But we decided to go ahead and do it and do one more lap and see if it would make it. Normally I would say 3 volts per cell, with a 4-cell pack, 12 volts is where I want to get on the ground. And I wasn't sure if we'd be able to make this this last lap. And right now I'm kind of noticing down in the field there, you can see the reflection of the moon in the water standing between the rows. So it was getting kind of late by the end of the flight here. You can see the moon's kind of showing up there at the top of the frame, coming in and out. But yeah, you can see we're at 12.4, 12.5 volts right now. And I didn't want to push it too much farther past 12 volts. I wanted to basically be close to home and ready to set up my landing at 12 volts. Because in my testing that I've done, I've discharged these batteries on the workbench and kind of logged their performance over a couple of different chart cycles. And I know that once you hit 12 volts, it's going to start plummeting pretty fast. Because these cells between, 2.5 is kind of your safe limit to discharge them. You don't really want to go any more than 2.5 volts per cell, which is 10 volts for the 4S pack. But they drop off pretty steep at once they hit 12 volts or 3 volts per cell. Once they hit 3 volts per cell, they drop off pretty steep down to 2.5. There's really not much left between there. So that's kind of my mental note. Once I hit 12 volts with these cells, I don't want to really push them any farther. I just want to basically set up and get on the ground from that point. So as you can see here, we've already dropped to 12.3 volts. And there's 12.2. And kind of 12.2, 12.3 right there. And what you can't see, I also have on the Yahoo telemetry script, I do have, it reads on there the individual cell voltage rather than the overall battery voltage. And I was kind of watching that one. You have a little bit more precision there, up to two digits. A little more precision than what I have showing on my OSD. But even the full battery voltage, you can see it's already down to 12.1. And we're just reaching that 2 mile waypoint now. And we still have to turn and go all the way back home. But you can see farther into the flight here, as the sun set and everything, it kind of calmed down. That crosswind speed has dropped. It was running like 10, 11 miles an hour. It's dropped to around 7 and 8 now. And it's not a dead crosswind. We do have a little bit of easterly component to it. It's mostly a crosswind, but it is kind of pushing a little bit from the east. So I'm kind of hoping in my mind that it might be enough of a tailwind to kind of push me home. It'll at least help. It won't hurt, but it might help push me home a little bit. As you can see, we've already dropped down to 11.8. So we're at the point now where the battery is kind of tanking at the end, and we're 2 miles from home, and we still have to make it back. But you see, we're already down to 11.7 now. We're pretty much at the end of the battery. And so I'm at this point, I'm just kind of hoping it'll make it home. And I'm not making it a point to do anything special yet, but you'll see farther into the flight, I switched to fly-by-wire at one point and let it start losing altitude once I was sure we're close enough to glide back. And just kind of stretching it out. See, we're down to 11.5 already, 11.6, 11.5. And at this point, I know I've pretty much killed the battery. There's nothing left in it. It's dropping pretty quick, and I'm just trying to get home. But yeah, you can see that crosswind is still kind of a crosswind with a little bit of tailwind component to it, and we're showing about 9.5 miles an hour here. So it's kind of varying a little bit, and we're down to 11.2 now. And like I said, the lowest you really want to push this battery is 10 volts, which again is 2.5 volts per cell, which is pretty much the limit you want to go without damaging a 18650. Personally, I like to keep them up to about 3 volts per cell minimum, but 2.5 is the absolute minimum that they're rated for. And you'll see we kind of tested that theory coming up here and then some. But yeah, we're almost a mile out now, or almost a mile on the way back home, rather. Still a little bit more than a mile out. So we're crossing 1 mile here shortly, and we're down to 10.5 volts. So I'm thinking, okay, we might make it. It's looking pretty good, but we're right on the limit. And still just kind of milking it home, hoping it'll make it. And we're still running the auto throttle and everything, letting it fly itself, and it's cruising pretty good at about 4.5 amps, which is a little bit higher than normal. With the smaller battery, it does cruise at a little bit less power than this, but obviously it's going to be using a little bit more power to maintain altitude with a heavier battery. And yeah, you can see the voltage up there flashing. We're down to 9.3, 9.2, 9.1, 9, 8.9, 8.8, 8.7. So yeah, at this point we've basically ran out of battery. We're just kind of flying home on fumes, or I guess in this case electron dust, or whatever is in there, whatever chemistry is going on in those batteries, lithium ion. But yeah, we're hitting 8 volts now, 7.9. Now if you notice in the lower left hand corner is the battery voltage that the video transmitter is receiving. That's after it runs through the step down regulator in the flight controller. So it's actually lower than the battery voltage. And you'll see I actually get to a point where I lose video here once that voltage drops low enough. But you can see the battery did come back up a little bit right there. When I cut the power, I switched back to fly-by-wire for a minute and pulled the power. And there goes the video. As you can see at the last minute there, I switched to return to launch, because I was pretty sure it wasn't going to make it back. And I kind of went outside to land it manually. I wasn't sure if it was going to glide all the way home, but I had to run outside to land it visually, line of sight. And you'll see coming up here shortly that the video does actually come back once I cut the power. While I was outside, I switched to fly-by-wire A, and you can see that here, and cut the power down really low, and was just kind of milking it back. And it was actually a little bit high. I had enough room to dive down, get some airspeed up, do one final little lap off the end of the runway there just to bleed some altitude and get it back on the ground. And you can see now that I've cut the power, the battery voltage and everything is coming back up, and there I am landing visually, and I can still milk a nice landing, kind of grease it in, line of sight. And you see the battery voltage does start to come back up at rest. It's still a little bit low, but it does come back up to 10 volts at rest. There's some stats. We covered 43.45 miles, and we're in the air for 87 minutes and 16 seconds. And we used a total of 5,814 milliamp hours. And I was kind of curious at the end of the flight. So I did charge the battery back up, and I don't remember the milliamp hour value right offhand, but I know it was well within the range of acceptability. It was almost perfect. If I remember right, it was like 99.93% accurate or whatever. And so I'm really happy with the way everything performed, and that's how long it'll fly. So hopefully the video hasn't been too boring. Hopefully it's been enjoyable, and we'll see where we go from here. There is some stuff coming up that I can't talk about yet. Kind of agreed not to for the time being, but that'll be interesting when that comes around, but that'll be later. And in the meantime, I may work on something different, but I guess we'll see. So hopefully I will see you all in the next video.